Hello, my friends. What I thought I'd do this evening is spend a bit of time talking about lighting. So, lighting is probably the single most important aspect of your scene that makes the difference between whether it looks good or whether it doesn't look good. It works in conjunction with your textures. So if you have a really bad texture and good lighting, you're never going to make it look good. And if you've got bad lighting and a great texture, you're still never going to make it look good. So for this tutorial, we're just going to use this model. She's got lots of skin, so she'll show up good lighting, and it's a pretty good skin texture, a bit overworked if anything. But we'll just start off with a simple render. So at the moment we have the standard Poser 13 lighting setup, and we'll talk about that in some detail in a minute. And in the background is the construct, which is the background area. It's kind of a dome. And we'll start with the basic render just so as you can see what we're working with. In fact, we don't need to render. There you go. It's already got that. And I'm going to drink coffee while we talk because it's late. So this texture, I think, is called felony. Let me look it up while that renders. Oh, I can't access the library. Okay, that's enough to give you the idea. That texture is Annie. Annie? Oh no, that was the eyes. Columbia. This texture is. It's Victoria 4 Columbia texture, and then I changed the eyes because the eye texture wasn't working. For those of you who are relatively new to Poser, you can switch eyes from any different character of the same generation. So, for example, here you might have Columbia here that you like the overall texture, but you could have another texture of another character. Let's see, Felony's got different eyes. Here, different on an eyeshadow, you could probably put that on, different types of eyes there. So you can mix and match the texture elements of any generation. So this is Victoria. You could probably put Michael 4, Freak 4, Hero 4, the Girl 4, any of that generation 4 stuff will have the same UV mapping. And with this texture, the initial texture was way too shiny for Superfly rendering. So what I had to do was go into the texture, and this here, remember I said it's going to be one of the specular elements that plugs into the alternate here, and it was this blin which was set to 1.1. So I turned it down to 0.5 on all of the elements except the nipples. I thought they might be visible. They're not, but I turned those to 0.7 just to give them a bit of shine, and also the lips. So we see here that's quite a nice render already. So let's just have a look. So this is the default Poser lighting setting, and I have to say one of the things that they've done consistently with each generation is improve the lighting. So let's just have a look at this lighting rig. So there's 4 lights, but you can only see 3 of them. So this is what we would call a basic 3-point lighting setup with one addition, and you'll see why in a minute. So what a 3-point lighting setup does is it'll have a light from one side, a light from the other 45 degrees. So if we were to look at this from the top, I just press T there to go top. I've got a quick key set up. So what I have here is this is the main light. So if I select this, and I'm just going to rename that from light 2 to key, because that's the common name for the main light. And the key light provides the majority of the illumination for your scene. Then what you have is an additional light called the fill, and this is light 4. And then at the back we have a light called rim, and we'll talk about those a bit in a minute. And there's a 4th light you can't see, which is another fill light, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. So this is the basic Poser 13 default lighting setting. You can replicate this for any version of Poser that has these things. So the key light, as I said, provides the majority of the illumination. So you tend not to have that straight on because you're thinking about how, let me just go into the face, you're thinking about how it's going to illuminate the surface of the skin. But more importantly, you're thinking about how it's going to throw shadows, because shadows are what are used to create sculpting and specular highlights. So over here up in the air is that light. If you can see here, it's above her body level. And what they've done is they've moved this really far away. Over here are the parameters for this light, and you can see it's an area light. And why they use an area light is because an area light is the equivalent of a photographic softbox. Here's a softbox in photography, and you can see that the actual light is in here, but then the softbox has this thing called a diffuser in front of it, which is just a kind of semi opaque material, and it diffuses the light so it creates much softer shadows, if any shadows at all. And so what they've done, Poser didn't have these area lights early on, but I think maybe version, I'm going to guess around about 8 or 9, maybe even 10, they added these area lights, and they give us a much softer shadow area here around the face, so you don't get harsh shadows on the face. And then this fill light, if we go back to her face, let me see, well, Main, do it there, Main. Okay, so we've got the key light coming from over here. Key, think of that as like the main light. Then what that will do very often is you'll get one side of the face is nicely lit and the other side will have harsh shadows. So what we do is we put another light over here. Now in this particular case, the light is down low and it's called the fill light, and it fills in the areas of darkness where the key light doesn't illuminate. In this case, it's down low, so it comes up underneath the chin, which is quite a nice way of doing it. It's more common to have it up higher. So if we go back to our auxiliary camera here, see, this is actually below her head level, but it more commonly would be up here. So they're both shining in from above head level. And this is a spotlight. And again, when we click on it, we can see here it tells you the type of light. Now, there's something interesting here, and I'm not really sure why it does it. I'm sure that channel friend Heriberto will have something to say about this, because he's always got good advice on lighting. But the spotlight by default has this option called attenuation, and it's set by default to inverse square. And what that does is it uses the inverse law for lighting. It also applies to a lot of other physics properties. And what that means is that the fall of the brightness of the lighting is inverse of the square of the distance, I believe. I'm just doing that off the top of my head. But what it tells you is how quickly that it gets darker the further away you get. And the interesting thing is that you get that with a spotlight, and you also get that with a point light, which is like a light bulb, basically an omnidirectional spotlight, you could think of it. But you don't get that option with this area light. You'll see down here, there's no option down here to set the attenuation. It just falls off gradually with no control over distance. So I guess you would say that it's a linear fall off over distance. So anyway, this is providing this nice gentle lighting here. And because it's using, even though the light doesn't have that attenuation option, it's still subject to the physics of real world distance and the inverse square law. So although we didn't set the attenuation, the fall off over distance is still going to be an issue. Hello, Matt from the future here. I realised that bit about the area light, I contradicted myself. I talked about a linear fall off, and then I talked about a graduated fall off. And so I decided to go and have a look at the way they were doing. I was going to do some tests, but then I noticed here on an area light, which you can tell by this, it actually comes with inverse square attenuation, and it's hard coded, so you can't change it. And although in the manual it doesn't say that it's inverse square or linear or whatever, it is set here so you can't change it, and it does say it's the most realistic type of light. So I just thought I'd clarify that. Now back to the past. And so what that means is the further away the light gets, the brighter you have to make it to illuminate. So if I move this very, very close, for example, it might not illuminate her legs. So what they've done is they've moved it far back, but then, and here's the interesting thing, they've turned the intensity up to 700%. Now, traditionally, you have to turn area light intensity up more than you would with a point light anyway, or a spotlight. Also, the larger you make that area light, and this is a useful trick. If I make this area light up here, supposing it's in the room, there are times when you want what do they call that type of lighting? The strip lighting that you might get in an office. So rather than having little hot spots of light in the ceiling, what you do is you'll take an area light and then you put it in the ceiling, and then you stretch it so that it fills the entirety of the ceiling. And the larger this area light gets, not just the more distant it is, but the larger it gets, the more you have to turn up the intensity, which is the brightness essentially. So anyway, we've got this here, and this is how you can tell which is the key and which is the fill. This has an intensity of 700%. This one only has an intensity of 95%. And then what we have down here is the rim light, as we've already talked about, and that also has an intensity of 700%, but for a very different reason. This is a spotlight. And what we want to do is this spotlight by default illuminates the back of her head. So let's just look at that render, and it just gives this slight detail here. So otherwise she could very easily fade into the background. Like we'll talk about the fourth light in a second, because generally 3-point you wouldn't have a fourth light. But what it's done is the rim light stops her fading into the background by having this kind of highlight around the edge. Generally speaking, the rim light would be much, much brighter than the other lights. You know, I mean, I would tend to move the rim light closer to give me more control, and then I'd change the arc at the end of the angle of the light, and then I'd turn it very bright, maybe 300 to 500%. In this particular case, what they've done is they've moved it really far away, and then they put it even higher because of the same thing, the inverse square law. Now, what you need to be careful of, and this is why I tend not to put my rim lights very far away, or even my key or fill lights. See these light pools on the floor. So supposing I'm doing a render where I'm this kind of distance, those light pools, I don't want those to be visible. So with the spot, what I can do is reduce the end arc, the arc angle at the end, which you could think of it as being like the cone of the light. So I can reduce the cone and then aim it very, very, I'm pointing at the screen, donut. Aim it very specifically at the part of her that you want. And here's a good way for doing that. So this light is, I don't know what light it is, light 4, let's say. And we're going to go to the cameras, and we're going to choose a camera view that I think is the shadow cam for that. Okay, so shadow cam 4 is the fill light. Now, I'm just going to show you a really cool tool. This is Light Dots from Ken 1171, and he has a useful action here. I select it here, and it renames all shadow light cams. So these cams now have the name of the light that they are. So the one light that we haven't talked about is this light here, which is the infinite light. So now I know if I go to the rim light here, I'll now be viewing the scene from the rim light. So let me see, what is the, let's just choose that light rim. So the angle end is 70 degrees. So I know that it's pointing here. So what I could do is reduce that angle very, very fine, and then do point at shoulder to get a very, very specific shoulder rim. I'm not going to do that now because I just want to leave it on the default settings, but that's a way you can do it. And also, this is a really good way to see how your lights are aiming. Now, what they appear to have done is they've just manually aimed the light at this point here, and they just left it, obviously because they don't know what figures you've got in your scene. But if I were creating this scene, I would point this rim light, and I'd use this option here, which is object point at, and then I choose to point it at the figure's head that was my main figure, or whatever item in the, it could be an object, or it could be a scene, or could be some kind of fabulous Ark of the Covenant or something that I want highlighted with a rim light. And I can use point at, and then it will point at that. Wherever you move it, it will point at it, and it will be more accurate. And then when I mess about with these angles here, the end angle, then I know that it's still going to be pointing at the thing I want. So spotlight for a rim light, spotlight over here for a fill light, which just gives detail on this side so it's not in shadow, and area light for the main or key light. Now, as I mentioned, there's one more light in this scene which you can't see, but which you can see over here, the light controls. I've got 4 lights, and this light up here doesn't have a name. I'm just going to call that sky. It's an infinite light. So infinite lights essentially have light beams which are parallel to each other. They neither spread nor converge. They come out parallel. They have no fall off over distance. They're basically the same as the light from the sun. I mean, the light from the sun actually is a point light, but at the distance we are from it, the light beams functionally hit us parallel, and that's what this represents. So the skylight comes in from up here somewhere. And let me just show you its effect on the scene. So I'm just going to go back to my main camera, and this was what we had before. And I'll just show you what happens if we turn the skylight off. Now, I've talked at some length about the construct in the background and the background sky dome. And that's what we have here. So you can see this dome looks awful now, yeah? And by default, whenever you load Poser, it has this dome, and you can set it default not to have it, but it's fairly useful because you can colour it or do all sorts of things with it. So, excuse me. So compare that to this. What it did was did a background fill. So another way of achieving that, supposing you have like a portrait studio backdrop for different colours, or like a vintage backdrop which shows a fake outdoors or something, you might want to have I'm just going to bring that back in because it illuminates the whole scene. What you might want to have is a light here, spotlight, or probably more likely an area light for more flat, even light, facing backwards onto your backdrop here. And then, or you could use a spotlight and have a flat backdrop, and you can create a halo effect, a nice circular halo effect above the head. There's a lot of things you can do with backwards pointing lights, but what they've done is, if I just move all the way out, you can see here's the dome of the construct, and that's basically just gives us an area within which everything happens. So the lights are going to bounce off. As I say, you do need to be careful with these lights. If you're going to be further out, you need to be careful where the light pool's cast, because that can cause some trouble. So now I want to move on to show you that there's a few basic tricks that we can do. So the first thing is just by changing light color. So I'm just going to go in here. So we can change the light color either by selecting a light over here, so the fill light and the key light. So the key light, as I said, contributes the most color to your scene. So regardless of what you do with everything else, the key light will show the colors the most. And I could simply click down here on the color picker, and you can see the effect that's having in the scene there. Okay, now I can also create a contrasting color. So for example, it's very common in cyberpunk type futuristic images to have opposite colors on a color wheel, primary and its opposite, or well, I'll show you a color wheel first of all. So here's a color wheel. So you have red and green, or blue and orange, not so much. Often magenta and blue as a color. So I guess they're probably, well, I'll show you some examples that will make it easier. So here, We've got red and blue here, cyan and magenta here, green and whatever there. Again, red and blue or cyan magenta, depending on your colours. You can see what these represent in a futuristic cyberpunk world is the neon that's all around, and for some reason I always envision it as being these kind of, magenta, red, blue, green colours, and they do create a nice effect. So if I go to here, I'm just going to load something that I did earlier. So I'm just going to bring in a red and blue. So we've got red this side, blue, red this side, blue that side. I can't remember now. Let's render it and find out. And for a portrait, it can just add. Oh my goodness, I made a mistake there. Okay, so here's my lighting palette, and what I did was I just double clicked it to add it to the screen, and red and blue. I just typo. What I should have done was this to replace the lights that were in the scene, and now hopefully replace the lights in the scene. Okay, so I'm looking at the light picker here to see if it's replaced it, but unfortunately this is an annoyance with Poser. That doesn't update until the screen moves. So now you can see we've got a blue and a red. This is very pale red. I probably should make that stronger. Okay, so purpley blue. I think it's blue but with a low brightness. And let's render that again. And now you can see how that adds interest. To be honest, I probably want to mess about with the position of those lights. Let's just have a quick look. Where are the lights? Okay, one here, that's the purpley bluey one. Right, okay, let's just set that to a more obvious blue. And we've got a straight on light. I don't know why I did that. I am going to switch that on off entirely, and so that means it won't contribute to the lighting of the scene, and this one has to be red. And possibly I would change the intensity, but for now let's just see how it looks. M from main's quite dark, isn't it? That's probably why I had that face on light, but the trouble is I was drowning out the red and blue effects, so maybe I can make these a bit brighter. Oh, right, that's why I had it as pink and blue. I see now. Okay, right, let's give that a little render, see how it looks. Okay, so that's quite dark and gloomy. I would definitely want to have fill lights in that scene. Fill light, well, not a side fill light, but there's a name for it. Oh my goodness, I forget. Indirect light, a kind of a background light that kind of bounces around the scene to give the rest of the scene some. It is a kind of a fill, but it's a background fill. And I could change this to red and green, for example. Let's see, red and green. Now, if you know your color values, you could instead do it here with the RGB values. So I could just set green 100%, blue 0%, and red 0%, and that would be 100% green. And then for the red, I'll just do red 100% here. Oops, daisy. Oh, too much red. Okay, so that's how we get past the brightness there. These down to 0, and now we've got a very strong red-green mixture there. For cyan, they're tertiary colours, so it would be 50% of each of these. So cyan would be 50% red, 50% blue. 50% green, 50% blue, and magenta would be red and blue. But you can say, okay, I've made that red too intense. Let's turn that down a bit. But you can see how this adds a lot of interest. Now that's looking nice. Look at that contrast, yeah? Rather than just going with a single colour light or making the main light white, by having these quite contrasting light colours, you get a much more interesting effect. So you can imagine her moving down a street in, a cyberpunk back alley sort of thing. Probably not in the bathing suit, but you get the idea. Now, let me just clear those lights entirely. So I'm just going to use script utility, delete lights, and that will get rid of all of them. And I'm just going to add a single light, so it's completely black. And I'm now just going to add a single spot, and I'm going to go to A for area. Where's that spot? So that character appears to be here, and I'm looking at it from the top. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to get the spot to point at, and I'm going to point at her chest. There you go. So now wherever I move, this spot's going to be looking at her chest. And if we now look at her face, you'll see now that gives us a very, very harsh, stark lighting. Let me just make sure that that's set to inverse square. Thank you, Roberto. And just give that a little render. So we could do some fill lighting here, but there's times when you really want this harsh shadow. So imagine that we're doing a scene from Alien, and she's in the pipes in a bathing suit, obviously. And she's in the pipes, and we want to simulate some danger coming from the darkened side. So we see a horrified face over here. We put a single light here, but the real thing that we want to see is coming from over here. Maybe we could do a very, very gentle spotlight directly illuminating here, so that it doesn't light up the background, and really do a nice scene here. Here's another nice trick as well. Right, let me go back to auxiliary. Instead of having it over there, bring it in front. Oops, a daisy. And then we drop it to the floor. So this button here frames the light that we're working with. Okay, so where am I in relation to her? I am. Okay, so here's a little trick, okay? When you're working with very dark scenes, create an infinite light, and then you can just turn that light on and off once you've created a scene. So here, okay, so the problem was that light was buried in the floor. So I did want it low, but not that low. Okay, so she's over here. Let's get this light. I want to bring this in really close underneath her chin. I could just drag it, but for now I'm just going to do it here. And I'm going to point it at her head this time. So object, point at, head, just to get the point out a little bit higher, and lift it out of the floor a bit more. And you can see the way that light pool is moving up. Again, I could use the camera for that light, shadow cam light 4, and I can see exactly where that's going. Let's change the end angle so it's even more on just her head, and the rest of her body is kind of darkened. Now let's go back to here, so we can see now her whole body is in a shadow pool. Okay, her boobs are kind of adding a shadow of their own. What we could do to fix that is just move that light a bit further away from her body like this, and then that light pool kind of comes a bit more natural. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my infinite light and I'm going to turn that off here. And now I call this horror lighting. Again, it's quite stark. Okay, so maybe I might diminish that brightness of that light. Which light was it? So it's not light 2, it's light 1. This is why I'd usually give the lights a name. And so I'm going to turn that intensity down to maybe 25%. And let's see how that looks. This is another great lighting technique when you want to show something coming in from behind. So we're focusing on her face, her expression of terror. Let me just find an expression of terror. I'm sure I must have some. Female faces, Victoria 4. There we go. Okay, so we want an apprehension look. There you go. She's looking a bit apprehensive now. Well, let's make her full on terrified. Okay, and render that. Now she's looking a bit more fearful. Okay, and now we can have some creature stalking her from behind. So, you know, when you're doing lighting for your scene, it's a very good idea to get it out of your head that everything has to be realistic. You might look at the room you're in. How many light sources are there? Probably just one above you, or maybe one at the window, and that's it. And if you just did that, every scene would be very boring, very flat. But there are times when you want, say, an overhead or a window light to give you the natural light in inverted commas, but then you still want feel light to draw attention. See here, like these nice eyes. You might want a light that specifically is there to give these eye points, or you might want a light specifically. You see that there's no rim light here, so she kind of fades into the background. Or you might want something to light up the background. So get it out of your head that you always have to make your lights realistic to the scene you're in. It's far more useful just to choose whatever light creates the visual effect you're looking for, rather than something that's strictly physically true to the room. Okay, so there's one more light trick I'm going to show. Not a light trick, but it's a technique, and I really love it. It's so here's some horror scenes. Let's just have a look. So, we could have done just red lighting there for the horror scene. Just change your key to red. And that would give you quite a nice effect as well. Reds and oranges. Here you go. Here's another red lighting. Notice this is quite a flat lighting as well in this scene. Here, we've got fairly bright red lighting in the ceiling, but dark enough so that these points of light in the eyes are showing through. So that's quite a nice technique. Remember, if you want to do glowing eyes, just ambient illumination for the eyes in the material room. So I'll go into here. Okay, I'm just going to go back to something a bit brighter to set. Just going back to default lighting, and so what I could do here is just go to, say, the pupil or the iris, and then create some ambience here. So plug this image map into ambience and then turn the ambience value up, and that will give you glowing lighting. Let me have the glowing eyes here. I'll show you that now. So we'll just turn that to white so it doesn't alter the colour. Turn the ambience up to 1, and hopefully Bob is your uncle, and she should have glowing eyes, although it's not very obvious at the moment. Good for vampires, good for supernatural creatures, anything really where you want the attention to be drawn to the eyes. Okay, so that's quite glowy. Let's see if I can get that brighter. Maybe I chose the wrong eye part. Okay, what did I choose? I did iris, didn't I? I can never remember iris and pupil, which is which. No, pupil is the whole, but just in case. No, it's not. So iris, cornea is the lens of the eye. Iris is the hole in the eye, is the coloured bit that gives the eye. The lacrimal is the white bit of the eye. Pupil is the hole. Sclera is the little bit in the corner of the eye, the little bit of flesh. And eye surface is an overall covering, transparent covering, which covers the whole light. So if you want a bit of shine for the whole eye, usually apply it to the eye surface, and then tear is the tear duct kind of underneath that gives it a little bit of a, if you want it to be drying or a little bit moist eye, the tear is what you'd give reflection to. So what did I need to do? I need to set that iris a bit more glowy. So excuse me. So we've got an ambient colour here, which is this, which is quite a dark colour actually. So just for the sake of testing, I didn't set that to 100. Yep, there you go. You can see our eyes immediately lit up. So let's just say 10. And you could use, if you were doing an animation, you could have a still, except for this effect here, and then you animate over time the material colour of this eye, where the ambience increases, and it's like a dark sparkle in the eye, if you know what I mean. So it's quite a nice idea. You could probably do the same with the tear duct as well, or the lacrimal in the corner. Now I think about it, right? Anyway, you get the idea. I don't need to labour the point here, so I'm just going to go back to there. Iris. Just going to unplug that and return that to 0. There you go. No ambience now. Right. Okay. So there's one more type of lighting that I really love, and it was very, very popular in photography studios for a little while. It's called high key. Now, here's the simplest high key. What high key? You might think it's just that you turn the key light up really high, and it can be that, but and there are different types of high key. So here's a burned out high key, same here, and this is just a very high key where everything's kind of just brighter. So normal illumination might be. Let me see if I can find a normal photograph. So here, well, it's kind of high key still, but you can see the colours of her skin. Oh, here we go. Here's a better one. The colours of her skin. The background is white, but that's not really to do with the key. But the skin is quite sculpted because you've got the whatever lighting they've got here. They've obviously got something up here. Can't tell if they've got a rim, but it's well lit. But with a high key lighting, what it tends to do is flatten the image a little bit, especially here, and it can be used to blend the image into the background. Now here, they've done something to pull her out of the background, I guess, just the colour of her hair and her shoulders here. They've almost done an opposite of a rim light by having a white background. The white of the shirt is actually darker than the background, and that creates that effect of pulling her out of the background. By which I mean, if her shirt was pure white, the same as this, her shoulders would fade into the background, like this one's kind of doing. But if you do a high key, very high key, like a burn-in, you can actually. So here, there's a very, very strong light here, fairly strong light here, and a bright light on the background because there's no shadows being cast. And so what it's doing is creating this wonderfully kind of disappearing into the background look, and I quite like that. I forgot to mention, here's some high key photographs that I took. Just how you can use that very stark brightness to kind of pull figures out of the background. It's got a white sheet there, but then in Photoshop I ramped the brightness up. But it's a really nice technique to add some interest to a scene. This was, as I say, it was a style of photography for a long time, about 5 or 10 years ago, and it just made the photographs more interesting. So the simplest way to do high key, and this is not a very good example because I didn't really spend a lot of time on it, but the simplest example is just to have two infinite lights and just turn them up really, really bright. I think I might have even just done it with a spotlight. So, oh no, I did it again. Sorry, I didn't replace the other lights. There you go. So I've got an infinite light over here, an infinite light up here somewhere, and when I render that, and it's not going to look great, but you're going to get the idea. When I render that now, she's really, really bright and burned out. It's kind of working. It's, I'd want to spend some time with. If I was really doing this, you see, you get this lovely contrast with the hair on her face, kind of framing her face. But I might want to change her hair colour to white or very light blonde, so that even that detail is lost. But let me just render that. And you see that's really, really burned out. But it's an interesting portraiture lighting technique. I wouldn't really use it so much for anything except portraits, but it's more artistic than functional like that. Normally, if supposing you're doing a nude or you're doing a scene, you want your lights to sculpt the angles on the skin and the face, so you want to see the shape of everything. But if you're trying to do something artistic, maybe you don't. Like with the highlights, we weren't into all the suspense lights coming in from the side. We weren't interested in sculpting. We were interested in creating a mood. Over here was a very stark light when we did. Let's see if I can find it. when we did this one, a very stark light over here to create a sense of foreboding. When we did the hollow light, the you know, coming up from underneath, and again we could do fields and goodness knows what here. But we were interested in creating a mood rather than a shape, if you know what I mean. But with a normal portrait light, you want to see the shape of the face. So here, let's give her an expression that doesn't look terrified. Let's go back to something a bit more ooh baby. Right, there you go. Okay, let's render that again. So as I say, what I've done is I've created I think I've actually got a light facing backwards. Let me just see where the other one's facing. Okay. I'm just going to view through the camera of light 2, if it'll let me. Shadow cam light 2. Okay, it's not letting me view through their camera views. I know it's infinite, but I thought it let you view from the direction at least. Okay, so I'm not really quite sure where that light is. No. So what I sometimes do when I'm doing an infinite light, I mean, I can see on this. So if I move in fairly close, what on earth is? Oh, this is my infinite light indicators, right? Okay. So so they're not very useful there, to be honest. They really ought to be up here somewhere. But I can see here that it's kind of indicating where that arrow's going, but you don't usually have multiple infinite lights in a scene, so I'll just be able to look at one. But really, this indicator should be bigger than somewhere else. Let's just see if I can change. Oops, daisy. See if I can change that indicator to be a bit more visible. So display, object style. I can do is no. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I had the ground selected. Okay. So let's choose this infinite light. Display, object style. So it's an outline. I'm going to do smooth shaded. So all that does is lets me look at the thing here, but it doesn't actually place it anywhere more useful. That's quite annoying. So anyway, so now I'm in front looking at her, but I'm also illuminating the background. So let's go back to our main cam, render that again, because there's one other thing that I wanted to show you here. There you go. So this is super burned out, super ultra high key, I'd call this, okay? But if what you wanted was a slightly lower key, so let's just go to the properties. So we've got the light intensity here is 500%. So let's turn those both down to 250. And the other one, I probably just 496 is weird. I probably just cloned one and moved it across. So that would be a little bit softer. And you might even want to turn shadows off so that you don't get any casting onto the floor. So that's quite a nice high key, I would say. What you might want to do is make the background invisible. So here, ground properties, visibility off, and then turn the background color to white. So then you don't have to worry about shadows at all, and you just get this really stark high key image. I think I've probably talked enough there about some of the issues creating lighting and some of the ways that you might use the lighting tool. I hope I haven't rambled too long, and I hope this is actually recorded. So I will leave it there, chaps. Stop this. Yeah, I'll leave it there. So thanks very much for watching. Hope I didn't bore you. I hope you picked up at least one tip from this, and I will speak to you again soon. Take care.